My name is Amy. I'm a 34-year-old office worker. I've been married to Tom, a classmate from my university days, for 10 years. Actually, we don't have children yet. This is because I had a surgery due to illness when I was a child, and which has made it difficult for me to conceive. At the beginning of our marriage, my parents-in-law were looking forward to holding their grandchild soon.
Of course, it has to be a boy. He'll be the son and heir.
That's right. Amy must give birth to a boy.
My parents-in-law's family isn't a venerable one. My father-in-law is an office worker, and my mother-in-law is a typical housewife. Although my husband is the eldest son, he is always a bit absent-minded. I remember the day vividly when my parents-in-law got upset and came to my house. That was just after we told them that we were thinking neither to inherit their house nor live together. They came to our house again and again, shedding tears as they tried to persuade us, so it was quite a struggle to make them give up. However, I explained that in order to live with my in-laws, my husband would have to quit his current job and it would be difficult for him to find another job as a regular employee with the same treatment due to the recession. Despite this, my parents-in-law insisted they could introduce someone who could help him find a job and urged us to come over. My husband seemed astonished and said to them, "If you keep pushing, I'll cut ties with you." For both of them, the statement from their own son seemed to be quite tough, and the discussion about living together ended there. However, it was a different story when it came to urging grandchildren. After years passed without having children, my mother-in-law finally reached her breaking point and began persistently contacting us.
When will we ever get to hold a grandchild? We aren't getting any younger, you know. It's about time you start thinking about the future.
I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do about it. Even though I was asked, "When will you have a child?" I was the one who wanted to know the most. While our friends who got married after us were getting pregnant one after another, why couldn't we have a baby? Was it because of our unhealthy diet, or lack of exercise? Though I look back on my habit, the reason was unclear. Recently, my husband and I went together for a consultation at a fertility clinic, but no specific cause was found. If there had been a cause, there might have been a chance of pregnancy through treatment. However, the doctor also looked at the test results and was puzzled.
There doesn't seem to be any major health issue that specifically hinders pregnancy. It might just be a matter of timing. Why don't you wait and see how it goes for a while?
Even if the doctor said so, I'm already 34. The older I get, the more difficult it is to be pregnant. When I told that, the doctor suggested an advanced treatment. However, that treatment costs a couple $100,000 per session. Whether to undergo the treatment or not eventually became a discussion with my husband. Every night as I got into bed, I've started researching about the treatment, and it often led to sleepless nights. We decided to take our time and consider whether it's really better to undergo the treatment or to continue our lives with just the two of us. However, it's not just my mother-in-law who didn't allow it. My sister-in-law, Nancy, often teamed up with my mother-in-law to speak ill of me. On that day, when I finished work early and was about to go shopping, suddenly my phone rang. It was from my sister-in-law, Nancy. "Hello?"
I heard from my mom. You're having trouble having a baby, aren't you?
"Yes, that's right."
Hey, Tom is the heir to this house. Don't you understand how serious it is if you don't have a boy? How long are you two going to fool around? You have to start thinking seriously about the future.
"We're not fooling around. We're seriously considering it ourselves. Please don't pressure us like this." I couldn't understand why I had to be told such things. What's even more unforgivable is that all these phone calls and remarks were made when my husband wasn't around. That's why my husband had no idea he's being subjected to such heartless words from both of them. Since they kept calling repeatedly despite being at work, I told her not to call me during the day unless it was an emergency. As soon as she heard these words, my mother-in-law erupted in anger.
What are you saying? Not having an heir is an emergency. It's because you're always working so much that you can't conceive.
She yelled so loudly that people around us could hear, and they started looking at me with disapproval. That's enough. Anyway, I'm going to hang up. Feeling uneasy, I hurriedly ended the call, but it was already too late.
Can I have a moment?
I was suddenly called by my boss and we had a discussion in the conference room.
Lately, you have been getting a lot of calls during work hours. Isn't it inappropriate for everyone to keep answering personal calls while on duty?
I'm terribly sorry. I'll make sure to explain to my mother-in-law about this.
If it's an emergency, it can't be helped. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. Right? If it continues, I'll have to report it to the president.
Being cautioned by my boss and looked at disapprovingly by those around me, I felt mentally exhausted. Even my colleagues with whom I had been close seemed distant, and I found myself eating lunch alone more often. Despite working diligently, I couldn't understand how things had come to this. Before I knew it, I had lost 11 pounds in weight. I had a poor complexion due to the inability to eat, and I had been feeling unwell for a while. Even the colleagues who had been distant before seemed to realize the severity of the situation and suggested taking a break from work. However, I was in no condition to even listen to their advice properly. After I got home, I sat alone in the dark room, shedding tears without even turning on the lights. My husband found me when he got home in such a state, hurried to my side.
What's wrong? What happened?
He dropped his bag and rushed over to me. Upon seeing his face, I felt reassured and suddenly burst into tears. I continued crying until my voice became hoarse, and throughout, my husband was gently patting my back. After I calmed down from crying, I told my husband everything that had happened. I explained how my mother-in-law repeatedly called me during work, urging me to have a child, and how my sister-in-law would join in, pressuring me to have a successor. I didn't hide anything, even mentioning how I received a scolding from my boss because of the frequent calls during work hours. It's a family matter, and they're my husband's family. Hearing negative comments about our own family isn't pleasant for anyone. But my husband listened to me without interrupting, until the end. I'm sorry for saying all that about your family, but I just can't take it anymore. With tears held back, I told my husband in a trembling voice, and suddenly, he pulled out his phone from his pocket.
Hey, Mom? Will you stop calling Amy from now on? What you've been doing is bullying her.
From the conversation, it was clear that the person on the phone was his mother. Hearing this, once again, she countered him with a sharp tone.
What are you talking about? I'm just trying to give you guys advice out of concern. How on earth does that equate to bullying? Amy, are you being a bit paranoid?
She refused to admit any wrongdoing and kept blaming me. Despite this, my husband stood his ground. He made it clear that matters concerning the children were between us as a couple and requested that she refrain from intervening. However, while it may be a marital issue for us, it's not just a matter between us from my mother-in-law's perspective. As the eldest son and heir of this household, my husband should be more aware, according to my mother-in-law. I didn't expect that there were still people bringing up the issue of the heir even in this era. I listened with astonishment to her words, feeling incredulous inside. As the conversations with my mother-in-law became increasingly tiresome due to the lack of understanding, my husband sighed heavily right in front of me.
Listen, Amy has been getting scolded by her boss because of you guys. Doesn't it break your heart to see Amy, who's working so diligently, being treated unfairly? Please, stop calling.
With that said, he abruptly ended the call.
Sorry for the trouble caused by my mom and sister. You can ignore their calls and texts, and feel free to block them if you want.
Thanks for speaking up for me. Yeah, I'll block them. After that day, we didn't receive any calls or texts from them. When they couldn't reach me, they started calling my husband. At first, he dealt with it casually, but as it became more troublesome, he seemed to reach his limit.
Enough is enough. I won't answer your calls anymore, and I'll block your messages.
With that, even my husband started blocking their calls and messages. The two who couldn't accept it showed up at our house later, banging on the front door and shouting loudly.
Hey Tom, Amy? We are here, open up quickly.
We've come all the way to visit, so why can't you even welcome us properly? What kind of upbringing did you have? I'd like to see your parents' faces.
While they criticize us for not opening the front door, isn't it more uncouth to shout loudly at 6 a.m. on a holiday? My husband was awakened by the commotion, and was quite angry, not only because he had just woken up but also because his mother and sister had been making noise outside since the morning.
Enough already. Do you know what time it is? If you make any more noise, I'll call the police.
Just mentioning the word, police, might make many people hesitate and stop their harassment, wouldn't it? However, even when they heard that, they didn't leave. Instead, they showed a stance that they wouldn't leave until they were let in the house. Thinking that it would be a considerable nuisance to the neighbors, we reluctantly unlocked the door. As the door opened, They casually kicked off their shoes and barged into the room.
What do you think you're doing? Ignoring calls and messages. Is this how you treat your real parents?
Exactly. It's so disrespectful of you as a daughter-in-law. Especially when I came to share the news of my pregnancy.
What? Pregnant? With that, Nancy took an ultrasound picture out of her bag and showed it off in front of me. Nancy, who got married last year, had conceived a baby with James. My mother-in-law proudly mentioned it was her first grandchild and boasted about it to me. Congratulations. Take care of yourself during this important time, I said. Nancy smirked and said,
You must be feeling jealous that I got pregnant first, right?
I didn't particularly feel jealous, but there was a slight tinge of envy. However, since many friends who married after me were already giving birth, I had grown accustomed to being overtaken. Still, Nancy's constant boasting with a smirk on her face didn't exactly warm my heart. Probably Nancy's pregnancy had shifted my in-laws' focus. My husband's mother had simply stopped bombarding him with incessant calls. However, my mother-in-law seemed a bit disappointed that the baby turned out to be a girl, as she had her heart set on a boy initially. Nevertheless, I think it was happy that they had come to see us. When my husband expressed this sentiment to them, my usually opinionated mother-in-law fell silent. We hadn't given up either. We kept going to the hospital repeatedly, continuing with the treatments. Sometime later, we knew that Nancy had given birth. Looking at the photos, the baby had fair skin and sparkling eyes, undeniably adorable. After things settled down, family members gathered so my husband and I attended with a gift to celebrate. Seeing the baby peacefully sleeping in the corner of the crib, I couldn't help but smile. Oh, how adorable she is.
Her eyes look just like Nancy's.
Tom remarked. James approached us while we were conversing and asked if we wanted to hold the baby. Holding the baby with unfamiliar hands, I was first surprised by how light she was. Watching her sleep so peacefully in my husband's arms, I wondered if we would feel such endearment if we had our own child. At the dinner table, the conversation naturally turned to the baby, and once again, our situation was brought up by relatives.
You've been married for years now. Why haven't you had children? Being parents is what makes you complete. You need to become parents soon to reassure your own parents.
Such remarks pierced my heart, leaving me feeling uneasy. As I struggled with the conversation, Tom, who was sitting next to me, responded.
That's true, but having a child is a blessing. We want to be well prepared whenever the baby decides to come.
As my husband responded with a smile, they didn't pursue the matter further. But, 2 weeks after meeting Nancy's baby, a miracle happened to us. Surprisingly, we found out that I was pregnant. Despite years of struggling with infertility, both my husband and I were overjoyed at the long-awaited pregnancy. However, since it was still early in the pregnancy and I was not yet in the stable phase, we decided to not inform our parents until the stable phase came. Shortly after learning about the pregnancy, morning sickness set in, and I experienced several days of poor health. I couldn't manage household chores properly, and even going to work became challenging. When I consulted my boss about it, they suggested taking a break until my health improved. Considering my long history of treatment, those around me refrained from urging me to go to work. Grateful for their consideration, I decided to take a break until my health improved. My husband, despite being busy with work, actively helped with the household chores.
Are you okay, Amy? I got something light that you might be able to eat. Do you think you can eat it?
Thank you. I can't believe how nauseous I feel.
It's tough. I'll do my best to make you feel more comfortable.
Thank you. My husband was very kind, taking care of me and actively assisting with household chores despite being busy with his own work. He did everything without complaint, allowing me to rest assured and relax during this difficult time. 4 months into the pregnancy. The baby was growing well, and my belly had started to swell slightly. Just when I was about to inform my parents, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law caused a huge incident. It happened when my husband and I were visiting our hometown together. Since my parents' house was in another prefecture, we drove for 2 hours one way. Dad, Mom, I have a baby in my belly now. It's the long-awaited pregnancy I've been waiting for. When my parents learned about my pregnancy, they were overjoyed. Especially my mother, who knew how much I had struggled, shed tears of joy. Although she hadn't mentioned it, I'm sure my mother had been eagerly awaiting a grandchild.
Congratulations. Take care of yourself during this crucial time.
Thank you. We plan to visit again when it's time for giving birth. We stayed overnight and returned home the next morning. When I tried to unlock the front door, our nosy neighbor, Mr. Ollivander, from down the street, showed up. He wasn't a bad person, but once he got involved, he tended to stick around, making him a bit of a hassle. As I looked at his face, he seemed troubled about something.
Can I have a word?
Sure, what is it?
From your house, the crying of a baby was quite loud yesterday. Are you taking care of it properly?
Huh? A baby? What are you talking about, Mr. Ollivander? My baby is still in my belly, the baby hasn't been born yet.
Huh? But it was really loud yesterday, and Mrs. Sean and I were worried. It seemed to be coming from inside your house.
Not understanding what he meant, I decided to open the house and check the rooms. There was no baby born yet in our house, so it must have been a misunderstanding on Mr. Ollivander's part.
Hey Amy, it's urgent. Come over here.
What's wrong? Wait, what is this? In the middle of the living room, there was a baby lying on a futon. The baby looked unwell, with a full diaper emitting a foul smell. Wait, isn't this Nancy's baby? I recognized the baby. It was the girl born to Nancy. But why was she sleeping here? There were many questions, but at the moment, we needed to call an ambulance and the police. My husband and I made calls, and within about 10 minutes, both the ambulance and the police arrived. The baby was quickly taken away by the ambulance, and during that time, my husband and I were asked by the police. Mr. Ollivander, who claimed to have heard the crying yesterday, also participated in the police inquiry.
Was it around 2 p.m. yesterday? I saw 2 women entering this house. One of them was carrying a baby, so I assumed it was yours. The crying was quite loud, echoing outside.
We left for my parents' house yesterday around 10 a.m. Besides, as you saw, our baby hasn't been born yet. Those 2 women were probably my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. To be sure, we tried calling my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but couldn't reach them. So, my husband called Nancy's husband. Unexpectedly, we got shocking news. Nancy and my mother-in-law were apparently on a trip to South Korea together.
Nancy mentioned that our daughter was supposed to be with you, Amy. That's why I didn't make any confirmation calls. I never imagined this would happen.
They probably assumed we'd be back that day, so she left the baby. They never expected us not to return during the day. I quickly told him the hospital information and he said he would head there immediately. After explaining the situation to the police, they said they would ask my mother-in-law and her daughter upon their return and left my house. After the police left, anger began to well up inside naturally. I couldn't forgive leaving their child alone in such a room just because they wanted to have fun. My husband and I headed to the hospital where the baby was transported. The doctor informed us that while the baby was weak, there were no life-threatening issues, and she could likely go home in 2 to 3 days. Oh, thank goodness. I was so worried about what might have happened.
Amy, Tom, I'm truly sorry for what happened. Nancy's actions led to a terrible incident.
No, we're just relieved that nothing serious happened. However, there are still lingering mysteries. One of them is how they managed to break into our home. Neither my husband nor I have given out spare keys to anyone. How could they have possibly gained access?
Regardless, we need to change the locks as soon as possible. I'll contact a locksmith to come over.
Yeah, let's do that. But, will only changing the locks truly solve the problem? As long as they know where our house is, they might come back again. Fortunately, the house was company owned, and we've been considering buying our own home when we have kids. I should discuss it with my husband and we should consider moving to a different location until the house is ready. Sometime later, I received a call from James. He informed me that upon their return to Japan, they were immediately taken into police custody for questioning. Apparently, they had assumed that I would take care of her baby, so they left at home. They never expected that we weren't supposed to come back. They were taken in by the police on suspicion of child abandonment. However, they seemed unwilling to accept responsibility.
I'm not guilty. Amy is the one at fault. She didn't take care of her in my place. I'm innocent.
Exactly. We never thought they would leave the house unattended. They didn't inform us beforehand. They are at fault too.
They persisted in blaming me for not taking care of the baby, insisting they had done nothing wrong. Even the police officers conducting the inquiry were astonished by their selfish opinions. As for how they managed to enter my house, it turned out that during a previous visit, my mother-in-law found a key in the entrance. Then, she secretly took it and had a copy made without my knowledge. Assuming I had simply misplaced the key, I hurriedly had a spare made. I never imagined they would secretly duplicate the key. In addition to child abandonment, they were arrested for unlawful entry into the residence. Later, my father-in-law and James came to our place to apologize for what they had done. However, as long as we stayed here, there was no doubt they would come back again. You can't live here with peace of mind as it is.
Yeah, maybe it's best to move out as a result of this.
With that in mind, we decided to move. Luckily, we found a new company housing soon, and we moved there. Moving while pregnant was tough for me, but we managed with the help of our parents and relatives. It was a short period until the new house was built, but the fear of they coming back was unbearable. After the move, sometime later, my mother-in-law called. It seemed that she and my sister-in-law had come to the previous house, but it was after we had already moved out, so they called angrily.
What's the meaning of moving without even informing us? We were planning to visit.
I didn't ask you to come. Don't you have something else to say? After causing such an incident, shouldn't you apologize to me?
That's not our concern. It's your fault for not telling us you'd be away.
To still claim innocence at this point was beyond belief. I was not just angry but also bewildered. I see. Well, we'll never see eye to eye. Then, goodbye.
Wait. There's something important I need to discuss with you today.
What is it?
Both Nancy and I have been kicked out by your father-in-law, and we have nowhere else to go. Nancy might lose custody, and we won't even get to see the baby. We're homeless now. So, can you let us stay with you?
What? It seems that they were cut off by my father-in-law and brother-in-law and lost the place to live. They tried to seek help from us and went to the house where they used to live, but it was already abandoned. They must have been calling out of desperation. However, I couldn't bring myself to live with people who could cause such an incident without any remorse. I'm sorry, but I can't live with you guys after what happened. I'm about to give birth soon, and I want to spend my time peacefully. Having you both around would disrupt that peace. Goodbye.
Wait a minute.
After hanging up, I blocked their calls and messages, including my sister-in-law's. When they couldn't reach me, they bombarded my husband with calls, asking to live with us. However, my husband made it clear that we couldn't accommodate them either. With nowhere to go, they seemed completely stunned. Later, they ended up in an old apartment, juggling multiple jobs to get by. However, they struggle with interpersonal relationships wherever they go and constantly changing jobs. Also, they're tight on money and they argue almost every day. On the other hand, I welcomed my long-awaited baby into the world. Holding my child in my arms fills me with indescribable love and warmth. I'm sure that there will be challenges. I am determined to work together with my husband to make our child happy. How was today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, take care.